Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and while the season is near, it's not quite here in the Pacific Northwest. For me, that's been okay as I've been recovering from a wrecked ankle. But it's time for the rain to turn to snow. And it's like we've been getting our snow, but then we get these atmospheric rivers, a term that I had never really heard before, and the rain rolls in and eats all the snow that we have. And I want to say that it's not fair, but it is. It's weather, and it'll come around eventually, especially up here in the Northwest. What's going to be interesting this year is ski season in general. It's like the resorts proved last season that they can handle the sickness and they can still get people up the mountain. They did such a good job that everyone is selling more passes and no one is doing anything about the parking and traffic and lift lines and lack of staffing that is sure to hit every mountain that we all enjoy. So what's this ski season going to be like? Well, it looks like it's going to be a slow start, and then we're going to have this new variant of COVID, which we should all be getting used to because that's going to happen every year. So there's no reason to complain about that. It's just prepare for that. But what I'm anticipating this season is a lot of complaining. And while we need a lot of snow before anyone should start complaining about anything, we all have to realize that while the resorts are trying to take every single penny from us, they still do want us to have fun on the hill. They don't want us sitting in lines and being frustrated and angry, given that could happen. But remember, all of this is about the feeling that we get from sliding on snow. And I can't tell you how excited I am to click in, have all my problems or thoughts disappear, if only for a few minutes, so I can lose myself in my turns. And that's what we all should want out of skiing and snowboarding. The ability to lose yourself in a feeling that just creates absolute joy. And that's what it's all about for me. I hope it is for you too. But enough of this intro. It's time for me to get to my first woman on the show in forever. And I am so bad about getting women on the show. And while I'm the only one that points this out, I thought I would hear from a lot of you saying, dude, you haven't had a woman on in forever and what's wrong with you? But no one ever complains about that. I complain about that to myself, and I know I need to get better with being more inclusive, and this week I am. I have Christina Lustenberger, or Lusti, on the podcast, and while you may know of Lusti from her TGR segments over the past few years, she's so much more than that. Lusti's an Olympian whose racing style was either first or last, and when you have a high-speed career like that involves a lot of crashing, well, injury is part of the game, and on the podcast, Lusti takes us from the race course to the big mountains. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. Tell a friend about the show, and please support my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Dragon, Stanley, Elon Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Alpine Vans, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, it's time to talk to Christina Lustenberger. I'm going to guess that you're one of those people that has so much energy that they always need to be doing something. Like you may not have ADD, but you're really close to it. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate, but like anything that goes super hard, I also, on the flip side, crash pretty hard. So come the spring, after a big season, I have a big dip in energy, and it usually takes me 3 to 4 weeks to really recover and feel like myself again.
So you go into hibernation after each winter?
Yeah.
Okay.
A spring hibernation.
Strange. And I hear it gets so bad with you that you have so much energy that people will put stuff in your pack sometimes just to slow you down.
Hoji put a beer in my pack and didn't tell me until day 4 hiking into the Waddington Range. I don't know if that was to slow me down or he just wanted a beer.
And he didn't want to carry it?
Yeah, exactly.
So being that your life involves a lot of photo and video shoots, how does someone like yourself deal with the hurry up and wait mentality of shooting?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that is pretty ingrained within the ski industry, but I've just try and balance the hurry up and wait shooting and ski guiding and skiing for myself and my own projects so that I do have patience when it comes to going out and filming or shooting photos.
Okay. And like a lot of people that I've had on this podcast before, you're one of those people that was really born into this whole thing. Like, you're born into a ski family of the best kind. Your parents were both working at CMH when they met?
Yep, my parents met at CMH at the Monashee Lodge, which is just north of Revelstoke. And then my childhood, I was basically raised at Panorama Mountain Resort. I grew up in Invermere, which is the town below, but my parents ran the ski shop at the local ski resort. So both my sister and I grew up and learned how to ski on Panorama.
When you guys were kids, did you ever go heli skiing, or was it just Panorama for you guys?
No, it was just Panorama for us. We grew up free skiing until we were old enough to join the race club. And then I think when I was around 14, 15 was probably when I first started ski touring.
Okay. So with the race club, they put you in when you're a kid. I'm sure that your parents' shop is right there. There's a cafe as well. So is it pretty much just skiing all day? And when you guys get cold, you can just come in, warm up, and then head back out there?
Yep, exactly. And then usually we would finish our ski program before my parents would finish work. So we would be out playing in the snow, tobogganing, building snow forts until it was time to go home, which was about a 20-minute drive back to Invermere at the end of the day.
So there wasn't much TV watching in your day. It was more playing?
Yeah, definitely playing outside. I think we had cable, and then one day my dad was trying to get my sister and I off the TV because it was a nice sunny day, and he threatened to cut the cable. We didn't get up, and moments later the TV went black, and we didn't have television for, I think, 10 years after that.
Oh, man. But you did have ski racing, and it's the Windermere Valley Ski Club. That has a huge impact on your life. What does that start when you're like 7, 8 years old?
Yeah, the Windermere Valley Ski Club was the home club at Panorama that I was part of. And you join the Nancy Green program, which is the national-wide ski program for young kids. And I think that would probably be 7 or 8.
And in that club, because you grew up in a town with Ian Macintosh, and I'm sure there's other skiers that I've heard of. Is Ian in that race program as well?
Yeah, Ian grew up in Invermere as well. And then we were both part of the Windermere Valley Ski Club.
And are you on the race course the girl that's faster than almost everybody, like faster than Ian and the rest of the boys?
I mean, I think when I was younger, I definitely chicked a lot of boys. And to me, it was most exciting when I could beat as many boys as I could. And often when I was younger, I would even crash, get back up, and still win the race. But once you get older, kids are pretty fast and the competition just stiffens. So that was probably when I was first racing at like 8, 9, 10 years old.
But do you remember the time when kind of you're racing and your career's on an upward trajectory where you're kind of hitting the podium and stuff, but then your peers like the Ians and other friends in the world, their race career is not going any further? I mean, do you kind of experience that where like you're going to move on to a provincial level and nobody else is? And is that a weird experience for you to move on and not everybody else does?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely part ways with, your young childhood ski buddies or high school friends, but you're also meeting a lot of new people, a lot of new teammates, new coaches. You're traveling more frequently. You're traveling to South America and Europe, and everything's really exciting and happening fast. So it's been a really unique opportunity to kind of come full circle and ski with Ian again in a completely different setting. But yeah, at that point, I think things are just happening so fast and you're so excited to get to that next level that you'll let friends go and they'll go off on their own journey, whatever that might be, aside from ski racing.
And you had mentioned, too, that at 14, you're starting to head out into the backcountry or you're starting to ski tour at that point. I would think in a world of ski racing where it's all just train, try to get faster, that you miss out on some of that ski touring stuff. And when people like Ian and those friends, when they kind of step away from the race world and they have as much time as they want to do whatever they want with their skiing, is there any jealousy on your end where you're like, God, I just want to ski and I can't?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there was jealousy, but I was definitely kind of a black sheep on the ski team. My trainers and my coaches were always trying to control me, but I just always personally fought that, and I would try and bring my ski touring skis with me on every ski trip, just if there was one chance to go powder skiing or for a ski tour. And I think in the end of my ski career that was really the drive. I just needed to get away from the controlled sport, and I needed to be set free into the mountains and be able to adventure and take on a whole new path.
But by the time you graduate high school, that path isn't a reality yet. Like, you're full on in the race world. And like you said, I would think the travel has started. And it's really all about winning. Like, you're on a path to the World Cup and the Olympics, right? That's where people expect to see you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my early 20s, I was on the national team. I was skiing all winter, racing. And then in the summers, we were either dryland fitness training in Calgary or we were going to South America or Europe and training. And I think that drive to win and to ski fast was ingrained in me at such a young age that I personally wanted to see my potential and to see the possibilities within the World Cup circuit or Europa Cup circuit. But I think eventually I just had a different calling. I just was maybe a bit more free spirit at the end of my career. And I was equally excited just to step away from the competitive sport and to dive into, learning the craft of backcountry skiing and ski guiding. And first step was telling everybody that I was retiring, healing my knee, and then moving to Revelstoke. And
I'm not going to let you go that fast.
Okay.
Because there's a lot more to go through. I mean, you have the whole ski team. Like, you have to make the Canadian team at one point. Like, how old are you when you get on the Canadian national team?
I believe I was probably around 17 years old.
And then in terms of the way that you ski, because I was looking at your FIS results, and there are so many do not finishes or DNFs on your result card. And is it pretty much the way you ski? It's pretty much pinning it all the time, and you're either going to have a great result or you're going to blow up, and that's just how you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had one season where I finished one race. I just had so many crashes, and it was quite frustrating. And I think, I was full pin as soon as I pushed out of that start gate. I was just trying to go as fast and as hard as I can. And it took a few coaches to really make me understand that there's more tactics to the sport, that you can ski at 80% and still do really well. And your finishing status will be a lot higher than, DNFing all season. And there's tons of frustration that comes with competitive sport. And I remember that season. I learned a lot from it, but it was terribly frustrating.
And I can think another thing that's terribly frustrating is when you have crashes at high speed like this, it's one way to get injured for sure. And your history seems to be like a lot of blown out knees and full knee reconstructions. I think there's 5 of them total. That's miserable. But is that what happens? Is you just blow up and you blow a knee?
Yeah, I think too, the way that my ski technique, the way that I would generate speed, I would let my angle, I was able to create a lot of energy in the top of the turn and not necessarily have the strength that I needed to finish the turn in a good position that would keep my knees safe and be able to hold the line. And eventually, yeah, you make a miscalculation and you crash or just hit a compression and wouldn't have the strength. And the equipment that you have on is so aggressive that the weakest point is your knee. And yeah, I suffered 5 ACL surgeries from the age of 16 to 25, I think was the last one I had.
So that's almost 5 years of that 10 years that you're laid up in knee surgery.
Yeah. And I mean, those seasons and injuries were really hard. I mean, there's so much disappointment that comes with sports. And yeah, it's something that I think people don't talk about or teach you as a kid. Is how to deal with disappointment, how to deal with the wins and the losses. And now looking back on my career, honestly, I wish I retired a lot sooner, but all those injuries and all the wins, all the loses, everything about it has brought me to this point, and I'm grateful for that. But in hindsight, I would definitely have taken 3 or 4 less knee surgeries.
Right.
My knees aren't exceptional at this point.
No, and I would think back then, every time you have a knee reconstruction and then you're expected to go pedal to the metal as fast as you possibly can when you come back, it's not only getting your body ready to be back out on the snow, but it's also your confidence level and your mentality of the way I ski is I pin it, and I have to do that in order to get the results that I want. And is it hard to get over the hump of just letting your skis go again?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of support within the organization for training and physio and healing. So I think there was a lot of energy in just rebuilding that knee joint, getting yourself strong. And then eventually, once you got to that point, you could return to snow. And there's a whole process of rebuilding the on snow to training gates to racing. And it wasn't just 8 months after surgery, you're ready to race again. It was about a full year from surgery to return to race that I think my knee would feel 100% and ready to go again. Just a long time, especially when, you're an impatient 20-year-old that just wants to achieve all your goals, to actually stop, slow down, and have these huge setbacks.
Yeah, and you're giving up 5 years of the prime of your life, really, to get back to where you need to be. And injuries are obviously a part of why you couldn't go on in ski racing. But when you were in it, the 06 Olympics, they were in your sights. And then go figure, you missed the whole 04-05 season due to injury. Do you feel like you're going to miss your final Olympic window because of that injury?
Yeah, I mean, come the 06 winter, I was coming back from a knee injury. And honestly, I didn't have the Olympics as a goal for that season. My season was just to basically finish it without injury. And to my surprise, things went really well with my November training. My first race was January that season, and my first race went well. So then I was flown to Europe. Those races went well. I qualified for the Olympic team, and it just moved really fast. And then all of a sudden, you're in the start gate of the Olympics when 2 months before you were back home training on your local ski run, just trying to figure out your knee. But I had no goals set to make it to the Olympics. It all just kind of caught me by surprise.
Well, that's amazing. It sounds like it might have been the last 2 events that you qualified to, like on back-to-back days or something like that, which has to be a total surprise if it's not a goal, but something to be happy about with all the pain that you've dealt with in your knee. And if you didn't go to the Olympics, it might be something that you always think about with regret, like, man, I really put so much into it and I never made it there. Would you have left the sport thinking that if you retired without going to the games?
I mean, honestly, I don't think I was that driven by the Olympics. I mean, it was an amazing experience to be able to have, but thinking back, yeah, I don't know. I don't think my goals were quite there yet. And almost at that point, I was even probably thinking about ski guiding and backcountry skiing a little bit more than the Olympics itself.
Okay. And I'm not sure the timeline after this, but I'm going to guess you come back from the games, you race a little bit more, you blow your knee again, and you decide, I'm done with racing. Am I even close?
Yeah, so I finished that season, the 06 season, and then I didn't blow my knee until 07 the following year. And then at that point, I was flown home. I had knee surgery, and I basically milked the ski team so that I could get the best rehab and recovery that I could. And then in the spring, when it was time to return to the full team and fitness training, I had made the decision that I was no longer going to alpine race or competitive race anymore. And at that point, I just stepped away from it, which was the best thing I could have done at that time. And a really exciting transition for me at that point. I think a lot of people leave the sport feeling lost or don't know the direction where they wanted to go, but I knew exactly what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it. For me, I just felt like I was born into this amazing time in my life, and I was really excited to put alpine racing behind me and take a leap of faith into the freedom of what the mountains can bring. And what was really cool about that was skiing was everything I knew, and I wasn't leaving that. I was just stepping into a different direction, but my skis were still going to be right there beside me.
Now it's time for a sponsor break, and I'm going to start with Elan Skis. Why? Because last season was my first season on my Elan Ripsticks 106, and I will tell you that no bullshit, my skiing got better for the first time in 15 years. I credit that to having a ski that is lighter and more playful than what I was used to, but still just as rock solid underfoot and throughout the turn. This year, I'm psyched to ski my Ripstick 96 Black Edition, which will be the lightest ski that I've been on in ages thanks to the space-age carbon materials and wood core construction. And you know what? There's something to be said for a handcrafted ski built in the Slovenian Alps, and that's what Elan skis are. I like having skis built by skiers, and I know you will too. You can find out more about all the great Elan skis, including the first of its kind Voyager folding ski, and the whole Ripstick range over at elanskis.com. Next up is Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Peter Glenn has been getting people out on snow for over 60 years, and they always have a rad contest going on Instagram. This week, Peter Glenn is teaming up with Purnell to give away a winter staple, the classic wool jacket. This heavyweight wool jacket will give you tons of warmth for those chillier days. It's super comfortable with hand warmer pockets and an interior chest pocket for secure storage. Peter Glenn sent me some Purnell gear, and the quality is better than most clothing you're going to find in the snow business. So this is one of those that you're going to want to enter, and entry is easy. First, go to Peter Glenn Sports on Instagram and follow both Peter Glenn Sports and Purnell Gear. Second, like the Purnell giveaway post. And third, tag 2 friends in the comments. It's that easy. Don't forget, only one entry per person, and the giveaway ends on Friday, December 10th. Good luck, everyone. My final sponsor this round is Dragon Optics. They are known for supporting some of the most important athletes in the business, having an incredible looking product. But most importantly, they are known for technology, and the new PVX goggle with Panotech design delivers more in terms of peripheral vision than any goggle before it. It's a difference you can and will see, and when you combine it with Dragon's best-in-class color-optimized Luma lenses, their incredibly smart and convenient armored venting, and the ease of the proven SwiftLock lens interchange system, and you have the best goggles on the market. And guess what? I'm going to save you 15% on them. Just head on over to dragonalliance.com. Go shopping, and when you check out, enter the code POWEL15, that's all one word, all lowercase, and you will get that deal. Now, let's get back into the podcast. So your plan is to head to Revelstoke, and are you going there for guide school, or is that something that happens when you get there and you realize that's going to be your path to the mountains for life?
My first season, I applied for the adventure guide program in Kamloops, but I spent the first winter in Revelstoke ski coaching.
So the second winter is when you started going to guide school?
I went to the Thompson Rivers University Adventure Guide program, and that was a 2-year course. And I was kind of bouncing between Revelstoke and Kamloops. Any free time, I would be back here skiing, and then the courses would take me back to campus. And that program was the stepping stone into the ACMG guide program.
Okay. So in terms of all the programs and classes and certifications that you have to get, how long are you actually like in school and taking classes and, being out in the field until you're fully certified?
Well, the 2-year program didn't certify me as a guide, but it helps prepare you for the ACMG ski guide process and exams. But what I did get out of the 2-year program was my first aid certs, my avalanche level 1 course, a lot of really amazing practical courses where you have mountain guides as instructors. So there's a lot of just field courses, and then there's maybe a quarter of the program is in class. So I finished the TRU program, and the following year I was accepted into the ACMG assistant ski program.
Okay.
And that program was 1 full winter of 3 training modules and then a 9-day exam at the end of the season. And once that's completed successfully, you are an assistant or apprentice ski guide. And I was an apprentice ski guide for 2 seasons, and then I took my full ski exam after that.
So this is a 5-year process. It probably costs a ton of loonies and toonies, but you're investing in your whole future. And I think at this time you're on the Black Crows program. This is around the time I think they call you up and they say, hey, we're going to be in British Columbia. Let's set something up special and see if it works out. And you set up a film project with them. Is that the whole Blackfriar Couloir adventure?
The spring after I passed my assistant ski exam, I treated myself with a trip to Chamonix. And that's actually where I met Camille and Bruno and really got to see the Black Crows team in action in Chamonix. And at that point, I was skiing on Volkel skis. So it wasn't until probably 2 or 3 years later that I was dropped by Volkel and was seeking a new ski company, and immediately thought of Black Crow because I just love the team, the product, and the whole brand. I think that it's exactly the team that I wanted to be part of.
So that's how that works out. And then that whole Blackfriar Couloir trip happens, and I was watching the video, and you ski and climb with Johanna and Tom, and I don't know of them. Had you skied with them before, or is it something where this trip that Black Crow sets up is the first time you're going to ski with them?
Yeah, that was the first time. Those 2 reached out to me earlier in the season, and they had actually pitched a trip to Alaska that spring. But just due to poor conditions in the AK area, we decided to bring them from Europe over to BC. And I had a couple of ideas, and just with the weather and conditions, skiing in the Adamance range seemed like the best option. And this was a line that I had spotted when I skied another first descent in 2011. And so it had been something that I had been thinking about for a long time. And then, you have two amazing skiers, shredders, come from Chamonix. You want to show them your backyard and have a real proper BC adventure. So we ended up flying into the Adamance and tagging that line, which was really, really fun to do that with them.
Yeah, and that whole thing works out. But in just knowing that you go on this trip with people that you haven't skied with before, but have you ever been put in that situation where other skiers are brought in to ski with you and you're just totally uncomfortable because it's maybe not up to the level of where you are in terms of safety and mentality?
I mean, I think skiing with people you've never skied before is a huge part of the ski industry, just the way that different sponsors align or different film projects align. It's a really cool way to meet people, and coming from all over the world, you'll have different people with different experience. And I think it just depends on the objective that you're doing as to how much you need to rely on that person. And it's important to understand the consequence of what you're getting into, and to understand that each person in that team is going to step up and be there for the people that need to go out and try this big objective. But it's certainly something that you have to think about. And I think when you're new to the industry, you're just a yes person, and you're so excited to be sponsored and asked to go on these trips. So you just say yes to everything. And then as time goes by, you really have to just check yourself and check the style and the authenticity of these different trips that are presented to you. And you start to really consider, is this a trip that I want to be part of? And is this people that I want to share my time and energy with in the mountains? And you just start to say no a little bit more, and seek out those passion projects that are really true to you, because you need to be emotionally invested in these big adventures, or you just don't have the patience or the energy to be there.
I also think when you're put into groups, especially with people that you don't know, I mean, a lot of the times you're going to be put into big groups of men, because that's what it seems like in the mountains. It seems like it's a male-dominated industry. I'm sure you've seen that your whole life. But you happen to be more educated and more qualified than almost anyone out there in terms of just your knowledge. And do you ever get in situations where you're with guys who think they know more than you because they're guys?
I mean, I think the one thing I've learned is just to be humble in the mountains and to constantly check yourself. And the one thing I find is it can be hard to be heard in situations, or maybe you want to speak up, but you're not necessarily the loudest person in the group. And I think that when you do go on a trip with people being female or male, it's really important to make sure that everybody in the group gets a chance to be heard and to have their feelings talked about. Just, check the temperature of everybody. How does everybody feel? Just to give everybody a voice in the mountains, because somebody who's super educated or trained, you may miss something. And I think you can always learn from anybody in the group. And it's just important to take the time to really work as a group, whether you're female or male, and to give everybody an opportunity to be heard.
Okay. And I guess next up in your career, at least the next film project that you do that I'm aware of, is you film for Children of the Columbia with the Sherpas. And how do they end up picking you to do this one? Out of all the people out there, how do they like, we want Lusti?
Yeah, so I was guiding at Whitecap, which is a ski touring lodge in the Coast Mountains. And Mitch Scott, the producer of Sherpas at that time, was up at this trip. And I got to know him. He got to see me ski. I think maybe I impressed him a little bit. And then down the road, one season, he had been pitching this Children of the Columbia project. And I guess he thought of me because, one, he had seen me ski, and the other reason was I grew up in the Columbia Valley in Invermere. So I had those local roots to the project. And he pitched it to me in the fall, and immediately, when Sherpas give you that call, you just say yes. And so that was a really amazing opportunity. And it was really cool because it was the Sherpas calling to ask if I wanted to be part of the project. But the other really cool thing that I loved so much about it was in my backyard. It was filming out of Revelstoke, filming like basically the river thread that goes from my hometown all the way north to Kinbasket and then back down through Revelstoke and eventually hits the Pacific through the States. But to say yes to a project that you're also emotionally invested to was really exciting.
Yeah, there's no selling out for that at all. It's all from the heart. And the Sherpas are known for putting together things of beauty. Like everything they do is just cinematic art. But for you, was it hard to do the reading and the acting that was part of that movie? Because I'm sure that's not part of your day-to-day life is voiceovers and stuff like that.
Yeah, I didn't know that that's what I was signing up for until all the filming was done and I get a call from Mitch, because probably like June or July, to come down to Nelson and start working on some voiceover. It actually didn't take that long. It wasn't terribly painful and they did a great job. I think that movie was really well done and I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but it would be fun to go back and watch it again.
Sweet. 2018-19, that season, I think, is your first season with TGR. And TGR athletes really don't tell that many stories. They ski the NAR. And when you start filming with them, or I don't know if the sponsors hook it up or however it comes together, do you feel pressure to step up your skiing in the TGR world because that's what TGR athletes do?
Yeah. So when TGR approached me, they invited me on a trip with Ian, which was really exciting because Ian was my teammate from Windermere Valley. We grew up together, and now all of a sudden I'm on the North Face team, which Ian had been on for quite some time.
Did you guys ever make out when you were kids?
No.
Okay, just asking.
So yeah, all of a sudden invited to go to Norway, which happened to be 6 days after I got married. So I basically pieced out on any sort of honeymoon, jumped on a plane and met those guys in Lofoten. And I don't think I had too much pressure. I mean, you ski differently when the cameras are running than when you're just out with friends or ski mountaineering. So yeah, I mean, I was excited to film with TGR, learn from Ian and Sage. Those guys are veterans. They had been filming with TGR for, gosh, I don't know how many years, but they were amazing teammates. And then from there, I think this will be my 4th season coming up filming with TGR.
That first trip, though, that was kind of a shit show, I feel like, of conditions because I don't think you guys had good weather. And while human-powered things seem to be what you're all about, sometimes I guess you have to fly all the way across the world to make something happen. And do you feel guilty almost when you fly halfway across the world and you go to crappy conditions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I end up just spending a lot of time skiing in BC. I don't know if it's guilt or just frustration of like, why did I leave home when I could be skiing in the mountains that I know and the proper snowpack and good conditions? But again, that's just part of the ski industry is fly across the world to probably less than desirable ski conditions, try and make a segment, try and like integrate yourself into the culture that's not authentic to yourself.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, for me, skiing at home in BC and Western Canada is becoming so important to me as a person, and I'm really trying to pitch all my ideas here because I think it's where I'm most passionate about. It's where I want to explore, and it's the mountains that really excite me as well.
Well, that Norway trip, you end up leaving that trip early. I think you end up getting hurt. What happens on that one?
Yeah, pretty random, but we were on a down day just walking around the village and my knee locked up, like completely locked. I couldn't bend it at all. I spent 4 or 5 days trying to massage it out, stretch it out, release it to get my range of motion back. It actually got worse. So I hit the eject button, booked a ticket home, and I was fortunate enough to like land in Calgary and get a scope the next day to remove a piece of cartilage that had been like jammed up into my knee joint for almost a week at that point.
How do you get that scope the next day when you're in Canada where it's like a free healthcare system, which is great, but usually you have to wait a long time to get things fixed? It sounds like you landed and were fixed right away.
Yeah, I was really fortunate. One of my old ski team doctors called a favor to, at that time, the current ski team surgeon, and he basically stayed an hour later on his Thursday evening of the Easter long weekend to give me the procedure that I needed. Otherwise, I could have been looking at waiting around a couple more weeks of like a knee that's totally locked up and straight. And so I felt really fortunate to have that contact, and that the surgeon decided to open up his schedule and allow me to get in right away.
Well, that's amazing. And I guess I'll bring up another trip that makes all sort of headlines for the wrong reasons, is one you go on in Pemberton with the TGR crew of McNutt. Ian Macintosh is there, Sam Smoozy's there. So that's a heavy, heavy lineup. And you guys were in Pemby for like 3 weeks filming. It's another trip of getting a first descent for you, I feel like. And it seems like when I read about your career, getting first descents is, I don't know if it's a big deal to you, if it's a goal to you, but it just seems to happen to line up all the time you're getting first descents. Is that something that's important to you?
I think what's important to me is exploring beautiful ski lines, beautiful mountains. And then part of it for sure is skiing ones that haven't been skied before, because there's no beta, no one's been there, no one's done it. So you really have to like look into your toolbox and figure out how you're going to get it done. You have to be patient to wait for the right conditions. And so I think that there's this huge challenge that I am really intrigued by.
Is it like a puzzle?
Yeah, in a way it is. And one little thing about skiing and adventure mountaineering that really excites me. But at the end of the day, whether it's been skied or not, I think we all just want to be out there skiing beautiful lines that inspire us.
Okay, so with this trip, it's like March 2020. You guys are racing against the sun every day, like you're out super early and you only have a limited time out in the zone. Nick finds a spot he likes. You guys are kind of chilling, watching him crush pillow lines. And what happens?
This was the second line in that like little zone that he was skiing. The first line he skied, it was like beautiful, effortless McNutt skiing. He made it look terribly easy. Beautiful snow, minimal slough, sun shadow, like it just had it all. And he was psyched to ski the one adjacent to it that, to me, it looked no different. There was nothing that I saw as like a terrible hazard, and it was still relatively cool on that slope. So he put his skins on, went back around for another one, although this time he was skiing down the prow of this pillow spine line, and a minimal amount of slough like cascaded off and hit this giant hanging pillow, which then started to roll down this gully without Nick's knowledge. And when he finished skiing the pillow line, he aired into this gully, which was his exit strategy.
Yep.
Although when he aired into it, he met that frozen chunk of basically like a moving iceberg, really solid piece of snow. And that hit him and took him out, dragged him through the forest or these small trees, and then buried him on the lake. Basically, the slope and the transition of the lake and the slope created a terrain trap and fully buried him within like seconds while we're sitting there watching and filming.
It's time for my final sponsor break, and I'm going to start things out with Alpine Vans. Alpine is the one-stop shop for anyone who wants to live the best, most functional van life out there. The crew at Alpine is made up of engineers, fabricators, and designers who double as ski patrollers and passionate mountain bikers who live in their vans for weeks at a time. If you are thinking about the van life, you need to check out Alpine and need one of these vans. But don't just listen to me. Head on over to alpinevans.com and watch the video Cody Townsend put together around his 50 project van that Alpine fabricated. And you will see why no one is doing the custom work that Alpine is. While you're there, check out their thoughtful quote builder and know that even with the van shortage out there, Alpine has sprinters in stock and can have the custom van of your dreams in your driveway in 90 days. So now is the time to order and treat yourself to the best in 2022. My next sponsor is Stanley, and they invented the category of keeping things hot and cold back in 1913. You know, that green bottle that your grandpa used to keep his coffee hot? That's a Stanley. Well, they still make that green bottle, and it still keeps your coffee hotter than their competition, but they also make so much more. I'm a huge fan of the pint glasses, and think everyone needs a set. They keep beer or non-alcoholic beverages ice cold for hours, and their food storage options make parking lot meals at the resort so much easier. And they have so much more than that. And I'm going to save you 30% on everything. All you need to do is head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, all lowercase, when you check out. Orders of $75 or more, you're going to get yourselves a free Powell Movement beanie while supplies last. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They've been brewing the Northwest's best beer since 2006, and they also live a life of skiing, snowboarding, and biking, and of course, drinking their beer outside. The folks at 10 Barrel also support more in snow and bike than any brand I can think of. And their world-class team of athletes speaks for itself with names like Ben Ferguson, Lucas Wachs, Carson Storch, Kate Zelef, and more. But the best thing about 10 Barrel is the beer. And while I'm a huge fan of their new Pilsner, one that I haven't tried, but I'm going to, is the Pray for Pow beer. It's 10 Barrel's most awarded beer ever, and since I haven't had it, it's going to be my next six-pack I pick up at the store. I think you should do the same when you're at the store, and to find out more about 10 Barrel and all their beers, events, and pubs, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. From the video, you see him hit the trees. Trees are being bent over, and immediately you guys all go into go mode. And while you're trained for this, how many times in your life have you been in a situation where like it's instinct and training just take over and you jump into action like that?
I've done a lot of training in a lot of different scenarios. There's been only a few times in real life when I've put my transceiver into search, but never a full burial like that. And so, yeah, the training, like all of us, Ian, Sam, the film crew, we all just relied on all the scenarios that we had practiced before, the bits of training you do at the beginning of each season that refresh everything, all the protocols you need to do. And that basically just jumped us into this insane beast mode rescue. And to our surprise, we weren't getting a signal, and we couldn't believe this, but we had to just find him at that point. So we tried to go into a probe line. We were getting everybody lined up at the top of the debris. And then one of the filmers at that point got a lucky probe strike where he thought was the last point that he had seen Nick. He was actually the drone pilot, so I don't know if he had like just a different bird's eye view of Nick being dragged through the avalanche debris. And anyways, he was able to probe him, and then we dug him out. He's about 1.30 meters deep when we found him.
And how's he holding up when you get him out, or you get him free?
Yeah, I think he was just starting to lose consciousness. He was just kind of like mumbling, a little sleepy, just like you were waking him up from a deep sleep almost. But once he got some big breaths in, he came to, and then immediately he was in a lot of pain because he had suffered a broken arm. And that was his main complaint, was just the pain of his arm. And then we had to keep digging him out. Like the first thing you do is clear his airway, and he's attached to his ski poles. His skis had come off, but we had to dig his legs out so that you can actually get him out of the snow.
Yep.
That's really important, that you have to keep those people really warm because they've just spent 5+ minutes buried in really cold snow, not moving, not breathing. And now you're out in the middle of nowhere. And one of the biggest challenges is keeping people warm out there.
You guys have a Garmin InReach and you call the cavalry in. I've never had to use anything like this, but I mean, is it literally like you push a button and you're connected with someone and then you're calling in a helicopter and they're there in moments?
Yeah, I mean, you push the button, which is the SOS button, which hits a dispatcher, which I believe could even be in Texas. And then they see where you are. They call the Whistler Search and Rescue. It took about an hour and a half before the helicopter arrived. We were extremely lucky that the weather was good. The helicopter was able to fly. There was relatively no wind. We were able to keep Nick in the sun, and we were on a lake, so there's a huge landing zone for the helicopter to come in, pick him up, and take him out to the Pemberton Hospital.
So they get him off the mountain, and he's going to be okay. Are you the one who starts asking the questions about how a piece of gear that's designed not to switch modes unless switched on purpose turns off?
So they pick Nick up and he's flown out. We're on the lake. We can't believe that his transceiver was off. We knew that we had done a group check in the morning. Every day we had been doing that. Aaron, our filmer, did it that morning. So there was no question that his transceiver was on. We just were like boggled by how it could have turned off. But we had to get ourselves out of there as well. We needed to sled out back to the trucks and reversed basically our whole approach from that day. And then we went to see Nick later that day. And it was really the next morning when Ian was at home in Pemberton and he had Nick's transceiver and he was playing with it. I had assumed maybe it would have had some physical damage from the tree, but to our disbelief, the transceiver had no physical damage. There was no cracking. There was no screen damage. It was in perfect function, except that the slider had not as much rigidity that it would need to stay into the send function. And that basically spiraled us into, our own investigation, which then we brought up to BD and other people within the community. And to our disbelief, this was a pretty common issue with that model of transceiver. Yeah, and I mean, the rest of the story is pretty out there. I mean, the whole community was aware of it as of last fall when we decided to share this story.
Oh, yeah. Made a lot of noise.
Yeah.
But it seems like the company didn't do anything about it. It fell on deaf ears. I mean, at least you were able to educate the buying public. Was there ever a recall or any change ever made to the product?
So we initially reached out to BD, which was the owner company of Peeps at that time, or is still, in the spring, probably a week after Nick's accident, telling them what happened, how it all went down. And throughout the summer, we were trying to work with them in hopes that they would recall this transceiver, this model of transceiver. And we were really pushing that all summer long. And come the fall, our friends are starting to go out skiing and the community is starting to buy avalanche safety gear. And I just couldn't handle it anymore. I was like, we don't own it to the brand to do something, but we owe it to the backcountry community to share our story in hopes that this won't happen to anybody else. And so that's basically how it went down, is BD didn't say anything. And so we just felt obligated to share our story so that people would at least know what we dealt with, and also that it was a known common issue. And then once we dropped the story, it just became even more relevant that it was a pretty severe issue that many, many, many people were having at that point.
Have they ever righted the issue?
So I think it was in the spring last year. They called it a voluntary recall, which meant they 3D printed this plastic harness that you could apply or register to get. And the harness basically holds the transceiver in a way that locks the slider from moving out of send mode.
So they didn't really fix it. They tried to do a workaround. I'm sure you're not stoked on that, but you're probably not going to buy that product, so it doesn't matter, I would think. I mean, it matters because it matters to other people that are your friends, but really, there's nothing more you can do.
Yeah, we got to a point where there was nothing more we can do. I think people within the community, the CAA and the ACMG guide training programs, they no longer recognize this transceiver as industry standard transceiver. So if you come to a course, an avalanche training course within Canada, you'll be asked to bring an industry standard transceiver, which that model is no longer acceptable.
Okay, so there at least was a little bit of a win for you there. So you go through this really shitty filming experience. I mean, the filming part wasn't shitty, but the whole trip was a shitty experience. And then the whole world gets shut down for COVID. And it's an interesting time for the professional athlete because a lot of brands got scared in the beginning. And were you thinking about, I have to prove my value to sponsors so they keep me? Or you just didn't know what to think? What was going through your head when the whole world started to freak out because of this global pandemic?
Yeah, so after Nick's accident, I went home. I was supposed to go to Pakistan with Brett Harrington that spring on a ski expedition for the North Face. And I think it was 3 or 4 weeks before that happened, TNF canceled all international or expedition trips because of COVID. But they supported us. We started this weekly Zoom call within the team, and there's, a lot of professional team development done, a lot of support from the team, and no pressure to go out and do anything. I think they just really wanted to bring us in as a team so that we could all work through this unprecedented times together. So yeah, basically just turned off the pro athlete for that spring and summer and waited for the next fall to roll around.
All right. Well, who are the brands that support the life of Lusti?
I mean, my main partners that I work with are North Face, Black Crow, Smart Wool, Promoka, Oakley. I'm so fortunate because the brands that I work with would be the brands that I would want to be on no matter contract or anything.
It's the product you'd buy.
Yeah, it's the product I'd want to buy. And I feel really fortunate that I'm not sacrificing anything, that I really get to work with the best brands in the industry.
And does pro skiing and being a sponsored skier, does that afford a lifestyle where you don't have to have another job and you can just ski? Or is it something where you have to keep guiding to supplement what you're doing with the pro cash?
Yeah, when I first started guiding, I was doing about 8 to 10 weeks a winter and, professional skiing the rest of the season. And then somewhere probably 6 years ago, that started to transition where I was doing more professional skiing and less guiding. Last year I did a week of guiding. This year I have 4 days booked. And yeah, I'm very well supported by the sponsors and the teams that I work with. So I feel very fortunate, but I do appreciate the guiding work and staying relevant. And I think that guiding only helps and balances this, it only, I don't know the word.
Enhances,
the professional skier or my own personal development.
Okay. Well, one trip that I need to talk about is TGR's Stoke the Fire. There's the trip that you go on with Ian. It's Mount Nelson. It's an 11,000-foot peak that's right outside your back door when you grow up. So both you and Ian have been looking at this peak your whole lives. Did you think you'd ever get a chance to ski it?
Yeah, I definitely knew that I was going to ski it at some point. I'd been procrastinating. I had been pitching this trip for the last 6 to 8 years to different brands, different companies, different productions. But there's always one reason or not to just not go there, not put the energy into it. I was being pulled different directions. And this season, or last season, coming up, it wasn't looking like international travel was going to be a thing. I was going to be in Western Canada for the whole season, trying to stay really local. So it was like, Ian, let's go for this. Let's put our energy towards Mount Nelson. Like, this is what we want to do, what we've been looking at and talking about forever. So it just was the perfect season to do it and to put the energy into it.
So all of that lines up, but this is something in your hometown and your family's there, your friends are there, and they know this is something that you're planning on doing. They probably know the risk of this as well. Is it something where, like, when you head out that morning, they're like, give us a call the second you get home? Or is it something that they're watching you from the backyard?
Yes, that's exactly what makes this line really unique and also challenging in a different way that I had never really experienced. So many times when you go on these big adventures or unskied lines, it's some remote valley and obscure peak, and nobody really knows that you're going, and you maybe share after.
Yep.
But this one, Ian and I showed up in Invermere. We're sniffing around the local ski resort with a film crew, binoculars, and a big long lens camera so that we can scope photos of Mount Nelson. We're both staying at our parents' places, and it didn't take long for the town to kind of figure out why we were there and what we were trying to do, which added this interesting pressure. And then the day before, my mom was a little nervous, and I was going through my gear and breaking down the whole ascent and descent with her and telling her the whole thought process just to try and ease her worries.
And she's a badass skier too, right? I mean, she worked at CMH. She knows how to ski.
Yeah, both my parents are really strong skiers, but still, it's like she looks at Mount Nelson and she can't necessarily see how you would even ski down it because it does just look like this sheer face with cliff bands weaving across it. And yeah, she was full of nerves for sure. And that morning I woke up at 12 a.m. and I left the house at 1, and I just was like, oh my gosh, my poor mom. Like, I know she hears the door close. I know she hears my truck start. and she's not going to fall back asleep. She's just going to be a ball of nerves all morning. And we ascend this peak. We get to the summit. It's around 9 o'clock, and we have a film crew that we flew out to an adjacent ridge line to film. So we have them watching. We have a filmer that ascended the peak with us. He's standing on the summit filming. Ian's dad is across the valley on the ski resort watching with binoculars. My parents are at the base of the ski hill. The ski patrol is listening in on the radio and watching with binoculars. So there's like, it was pretty front row center, and we just had to like bring it back. Just Ian and I, just that face. Priority is safety. And we just broke it down and skied it in really good style, really great conditions. And I couldn't have asked for, better way to execute that dream line that Ian and I had been looking at since we were children.
And that's one of the highlights of the movie. I think everybody should go out and see the TGR movie. When we were going to originally record this, it would have been the perfect time for me to tell everybody to see the movie. But you know what? It doesn't matter. They can still see it now. After this trip, you, Ian, and McNutt head over to Mount Dundick, and that's a whole nother trip that I'm not even going to talk about, because I am going to finish the show with something that I call Inappropriate Questions. And what I do is I get someone that you know to come up with 3 inappropriate questions, and they can be anything. But you are one challenging individual to come up with inappropriate questions for, because you've lived such a squeaky clean life, it sounds like. But I was able to get TGR legend and your first crush, I don't know if he's your first crush, I'm just kidding, but Ian Macintosh to ask the questions. And are you ready for question number 1 from Ian Macintosh?
Well, I have to say I'm ready. So go for it.
All right, thank you. And it's going to be really quick, this first one.
So why is your name Grandma?
Ian asked, so why is her name Grandma? Well, it's because when I go on these film trips with the boys, whole crew of 7, 8 dudes, I don't drink. I go to bed early. I wake up early. I'm just like super straight. And on one trip I was knitting, so they started calling me Grandma because I'm so lame.
The knitting did it when they saw that. They were like, she's Grandma?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will go with his second inappropriate question.
When was the last time you were tucked into bed at 7:30 at night?
Now, are you tucked into bed often? Is that kind of how you roll?
I go to bed early, and sure, it could be 7:30 Revelstoke time, but I tell everybody I'm on Mountain Time, which is just across Rogers Pass and like where the Rockies is Mountain Time there. So in the time that I'm following my winter by, it's actually 8:30. And when I do go to bed, yes, my husband will like come and like kiss me and put me to bed like a sweet husband that he is.
Does he read you a story?
No.
Oh, well, that'd be nice.
Yeah. And that was probably last night.
Okay. We will go with his final inappropriate question.
When was the last time you got loose and woke up not remembering anything?
Well, I'm not sure the last time. I don't remember, but I got pretty loose on my wedding night. I stayed up till, 2:30, danced the night away. That was probably the last time I really partied.
All right. Well, you should party on your wedding night. His last question, I'm going to try to cue it up because he actually had 4 and I forgot about the last one. It's a very easy one. I don't know what it means, but there's probably some meaning behind it.
How often do you need to be walked?
Ian asked how often I need to be walked. I would say 6 days a week I need to be walked, which basically means I need to go out and do something to burn off the energy.
Oh, it's all the way back to the ADD thing that I talked about in the beginning.
Yeah, full circle. If I'm not out running it off or skiing it off, I'll start to go a little crazy.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for inappropriate questions. And I can say, looking at your career, someone can look at your resume over the past 10 years and say, like, that girl is the epitome of a soul skier. But the reality is that you were a serious competitor for all of your formative years. And while that's strange that you kind of let go all of your training regiments and all that race stuff and have just found yourself exploring in the mountains, and that's not weird at all, it's just different. But I'm sure the backcountry is a much different experience than your race life, and it's fun to get to know your life and times, and I thank you for your time. We finally made it happen.
Yeah, and thanks so much for your patience. I knew I blew you off for like a month or so because I couldn't commit to a date. But yeah, thanks for your patience and for doing this in the evening so that I could get out skiing during the day. I really appreciate that.
So that was time with Christina Lustenberger, and she is proof that all badass skiers aren't always adrenaline seekers looking for that next fix. I mean, Lusti's nickname is Grandma, which may speak to her personality off the hill, but make no mistake about it, Lusti is the badass you want with you in the mountains. Yeah, she will outski you, but it's her knowledge and her experience that makes her such a game changer. And when you see her in the TGR movies, that's only half of what she brings to the table. That's the podcast. At this point, it's time for the review of the week. This one is from Angie Sherman. It's a 5-star review, and the title is Awesome Podcast. Here's the review. I stumbled upon this podcast randomly, not being involved in any of the action extreme sports world explored in here. Although I am a parkour athlete, which is currently in its baby years compared to the skating and snow sports, as it's only been around for about 20 years now. Very inspiring to learn about the professional side of other action sports and potential avenues to make a living off of a sport that currently has no money in it, LOL. Hopefully, it doesn't end up like rollerblading, as I have learned listening to this podcast. 10 out of 10. Would recommend. Looking forward to future episodes and hoping for more interviews featuring filmmakers. Keep up the great work. Well, thanks, Angie. And you know what? Parkour is an interesting one, as I don't think it'll ever be as big as rollerblading, but will it ever face the death that rollerblading faced, where it almost disappeared off of the face of the earth? Well, I think people will always be walking and doing it in an extreme fashion in some way or another, and maybe that is what parkour is, but I look at it as a pretty cool thing that has a few pro athletes in there. I mean, they're all sponsored by Red Bull, and they're doing some rad stuff out there. And there are some inline skaters that have gotten into the parkour world as well. I'm not sure about skiing and snowboarding, but I'm sure those guys have messed around with it a little bit, although they might not call it parkour. They just might call it doing something fun. Either way, hopefully it doesn't end up like rollerblading like you mentioned, but if it does, maybe another pandemic will come through this world and it'll bring it back like it has done to rollerblading, because if you look right now, that sport is coming back in a big way. They're selling a lot of product and it seems like it's a lot more healthy than it's ever been. So good luck to the rollerbladers out there. Good luck to the parkour athletes out there. This show's more about skiing and snowboarding, and that's the season that we're in right now. So I want to thank you, Angie, for sending that review in. You can email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com, and if you send your address, I will ship you a beanie, because that's what you get for me reading your review of the week on the podcast. For anyone else that would like to get a beanie, well, it's easy to do. You can either buy one on my website, or you can submit a review of the week, and that's not a hard thing to do either. What you need to do is grab your smartphone. I use an iPhone, so I grab the iPhone, I click the podcast icon, I search for the Powell Movement. When I search for it, I click on my logo. I'll scroll down to where I see the stars. There's an area where you can put a star rating. Please give me 5 stars if you think the show deserves it. If you think it deserves something else, well, give it that. Then there's a place for you to review the podcast. Please review it there as well. The whole thing takes about 2 minutes. It's greatly appreciated. It lets me know if you like or dislike what I'm doing. And while I could give you another long-winded outro talking about me way too much, I'm not going to do that. I am going to end the show by thanking all of you for listening and asking you to support my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Alpine Vans, Elon Skis, and Dragon. Have a great week, everyone.